Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of your sources, a mountain of information, and distill it down to those surprising facts and essential insights you need to be truly well-informed. Today, you've handed us a truly global mosaic of news, spanning everything from, well, the most intense geopolitical conflicts to fascinating scientific discoveries and seismic shifts in the global economy.
Indeed, it's a living, breathing snapshot of current events, and our mission, as always, is to cut through the noise, connect the dots, and reveal not just what is happening, but why it matters and, the diverse perspectives at play. Get ready for a deep dive that's informative, engaging, and hopefully sparks a few genuine aha moments for you, our listener.
Absolutely. We're going to navigate some pretty complex territory, so fasten your seatbelts, because this deep dive promises to be quite the ride, full of unexpected turns and, as always, a few surprises along the way. So we're diving straight into the deep end, and what better place to start than the shifting sands of geopolitics, particularly the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Many of you might recall a flicker of hope for peace, especially around the initial Istanbul talks that took place in Turkey. But from what we're seeing in our sources, that optimism has pretty much evaporated, hasn't it?
Unfortunately, that's the stark reality. The direct peace negotiations, which had resumed after Ukraine initially halted them back in 2022, were hoped to lay some groundwork for de-escalation. However, Ukraine's first deputy foreign minister, Sergei Kyslytsya, recently told the Kyiv Independent that these talks have become, unproductive.
Unproductive.
Yeah, and the format itself has exhausted itself. This isn't just a breakdown, it's an admission that the very framework for dialogue is no longer viable, at least from Kyiv's perspective.
And he didn't pull any punches, did he? Kyslytsya accused Moscow of adopting a rigid and extreme negotiating stance, essentially demanding full Ukrainian capitulation, rather than seeking a mutual agreement.
Exactly.
It sounds less like a negotiation and more like Russia dictating terms, which Kyslytsya harshly compared to the ineffective Minsk agreements, which previously failed to resolve the conflict in eastern Ukraine.
Precisely. A critical point of contention was Ukraine's request for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. Russia flatly rejected this, insisting that any halt in fighting must be permanent and legally binding.
Right, no temporary pauses.
No. And they also opposed Western proposals from countries like France and the United Kingdom to deploy peacekeeping forces, dismissing them as militaristic and, interference. What's truly insightful here is how these rigid positions underscore the fundamental, almost irreconcilable disagreement. Ukraine insists on its territorial integrity and sovereignty, while Russia appears to be negotiating from a position of seeking Ukrainian surrender and legitimizing its territorial gains. It highlights that the two sides aren't even speaking the same language when it comes to the war's conclusion.
And then there's the question of legitimacy, which Russian President Vladimir Putin has publicly raised concerning Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's participation in any final agreements. Putin cites the expiration of Zelensky's term back in May 2024. What are the implications of this legal challenge on future negotiations and the broader political landscape in Ukraine? It seems like a strategic move to undermine Kyiv's position.
This raises an important question, absolutely. It's not just about the legal standing of future agreements, but about the very narrative surrounding Ukrainian governance. Zelensky has responded to this challenge by proposing legislation to extend martial law for another 90 days, which would push his presidential term until at least November 5th.
Okay.
Critics within Ukraine, including former President Petro Poroshenko, various civil society organizations, and even international watchdogs, they view this as a form of democratic erosion and a consolidation of power, particularly under the influence of Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak. Russia, of course, seizes on this to argue that Zelensky lacks the legitimacy to sign international agreements, muddying the waters for any future peace talks. While most international partners continue to recognize Zelensky as the legitimate leader, Russia's consistent questioning of his authority is designed, it seems, to create a complex dilemma and cast doubt on any potential deal.
So, with peace talks stalled and Kyiv's legitimacy questioned by Moscow, it seems both sides are leaning into a more offensive posture. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that Ukraine will carry out further long-range strikes deep into Russian territory. This sounds like a significant strategic shift, taking the fight directly to Russia.
It absolutely is, and it marks a notable escalation. This announcement followed a high-level military meeting in Kyiv and coincides with renewed Western military support. Zelensky emphasized continuing efforts to destroy the occupiers and prepare new attacks within Russia, highlighting a strategic pivot to carry the war beyond the established front lines and into the aggressor's territory rather than solely focusing on defense.
Right, shifting from defense to offense in a way.
Exactly. Historically, Ukraine has targeted Russian military infrastructure, including airfields housing strategic bombers, which are deep within Russia. However, Moscow has accused Ukraine of also hitting civilian targets and causing casualties, even blaming Kyiv for a recent railway derailment in a Russian border region that killed 7 people. This indicates a worrying expansion of the conflict's geographic scope, raising the stakes for both sides.
Okay, let's talk about the Western military aid that's supporting this strategic shift. It's not a simple unified front, is it? There are some clear nuances and even disagreements among allies. What are the U.S. commitments, particularly under former President Donald Trump?
Yes, the dynamics of Western military aid are quite complex and often reflect internal political shifts in donor countries. Former President Trump has announced plans to send additional Patriot interceptors. These are advanced anti-missile systems to Ukraine. Interestingly, he specified that this would be a smaller number than had been paused previously, stating the U.S. looks to reignite arms sales to Kyiv. Reports from Axios, a U.S. news organization, also suggest Trump is considering approval of long-range missile deliveries that would enable strikes deep into Russian territory.
Wow.
A move Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican from South Carolina, described as very aggressive. What really stands out here is Trump's emphasis that allied nations, particularly the European Union, would cover the costs of these weapons, referring to it as a profitable arrangement for the U.S.
A profitable arrangement for the U.S. That's certainly a unique way to frame it. Now, what about Germany's stance? Because they seem to be walking a very careful line here, balancing their own defense needs with Ukraine's urgent requests.
Germany's position, as articulated by their defense minister Boris Pistorius in an interview with the Financial Times, is indeed cautious. Germany will not provide Ukraine with additional Patriot air defense systems or long-range Tortoise missiles from its own stockpiles.
Not from their own stocks.
Correct. They've already sent 3 Patriot systems, and only 6 remain in Germany, with others deployed in Poland or undergoing maintenance. So they're underscoring the vital need to preserve Germany's own air defense capabilities for its NATO, that's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, obligations.
Makes sense from their perspective.
However, Germany is in discussions with the U.S. to purchase 2 more Patriot systems for Ukraine from American stockpiles, with the European Union expected to fund these further deliveries. Berlin also consistently maintains that Taurus missiles, with a range of up to 500 kilometers, could escalate the conflict by enabling strikes deep into Russian territory, including potentially Moscow itself.
So they're wary of that escalation.
Very. What's fascinating here, though, is that while they refuse to provide their own Taurus, Germany is assisting Ukraine in developing its own long-range weapons through bilateral agreements without usage restrictions.
Oh, interesting. So helping them build their own, but not giving them the keys to Germany's most advanced systems.
Exactly. It shows a willingness to support long-range capabilities, just not directly from their own advanced inventory, highlighting a nuanced approach to managing escalation.
And the Kremlin's response to all this Western aid? They're not exactly thrilled, I imagine, and consistently portrayed as a direct threat.
Not at all. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has claimed that U.S. weapons shipments to Ukraine have continued uninterrupted, despite earlier reports suggesting delays due to funding issues and internal reviews in the U.S. Congress. Russia consistently criticizes Western military assistance, arguing it extends the conflict's duration without changing its eventual outcome, and critically, significantly elevates the risks of a broader confrontation.
That's their standard line, isn't it?
Pretty much. They view these deliveries as direct Western participation in the conflict, a narrative they use to justify their own actions and to warn against further Western involvement.
Beyond the immediate conflict, this situation is clearly prompting broader security reevaluations across Europe. Germany, for instance, seems to be having a very serious national discussion about its own defense posture. That's a significant shift for a country that moved away from compulsory military service.
Indeed. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier has called for a national discussion on reinstating military conscription in Germany, citing growing security threats in Europe as a key driver for strengthening the country's military. Germany suspended compulsory military service back in 2011, but the legal framework remains intact and could be reactivated by a parliamentary decision.
So it's possible to bring it back.
It is. Defense Minister Boris Pistorius's proposed reforms aim to incrementally increase volunteer troop numbers to 30,000 by 2029 and establish a backup draft system. This highlights Germany's recognition of a dramatically changing security landscape, moving from an era of, assumed peace to one of heightened geopolitical risk. Pistorius also affirmed that German troops are prepared to engage in lethal force against Russian soldiers should Moscow launch an attack on a NATO member.
Wow, that's a very stark statement.
It is a stark and deliberate statement of their commitment to collective defense under the NATO treaty, a profound shift from their post-Cold War military doctrine.
And it's not just Germany looking inward. Sweden, a relatively new NATO member, is also significantly expanding its military capacity. It seems Europe is collectively coming to terms with a new security reality.
Yes, Sweden, which formally joined the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, in March 2024, is preparing to significantly expand its military capacity. A key part of this is raising the maximum conscription age for former officers from 47 to 70 years old, according to the public broadcaster SVT.
70, that's quite an increase.
It is, and it's part of a broader effort to strengthen national armed forces in response to escalating regional security concerns, particularly in the Baltic Sea region, and to meet NATO's increased defense expectations. They aim to nearly double their military personnel from 60,000 in 2023 to 115,000 by 2030, committing an additional $31.4 billion, or 300 billion kroner, in defense funding.
Huge numbers.
This isn't just about troop numbers. It's a clear signal of increased military preparedness and a long-term commitment to a robust defense, reflecting a profound strategic shift across the continent.
And then we have Moldova, a small country in Eastern Europe, for our listeners, bordering Ukraine and Romania, suddenly finding itself in Russia's crosshairs, being labeled as a battering ram. What's that all about, and why Moldova specifically?
This is a very pointed accusation coming from Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, or SVR. They claim NATO is transforming Moldova into a military forward base aimed at Russia. The SVR alleges that the U.S.-led bloc is enhancing Moldova's railway and transportation infrastructure, upgrading airfields, and preparing logistical hubs to support troop deployments, thereby turning Moldova into a military testing ground and cannon fodder in the event of a direct NATO-Russia confrontation.
Strong language.
Very. They've also criticized Moldovan President Maya Sandu's administration as a comprador regime, which in this context means a government aligned with Western interests and perceived as serving foreign rather than national interests. The SVR alleges she's leveraging NATO support ahead of parliamentary elections to potentially revoke Moldova's constitutional neutrality.
So Russia's trying to paint Moldova's Western leanings as a threat.
Exactly. This narrative aims to delegitimize Moldova's sovereign choices and its deepening ties with the West, framing them as an aggressive threat to Russian security, much like they did with Ukraine before the invasion. The strategic importance for Russia lies in Moldova's proximity to Ukraine and the Black Sea, making it a crucial piece in the regional geopolitical puzzle.
Shifting gears slightly, but still within the realm of global fault lines and human cost, the Middle East continues to be a source of profound human suffering and incredibly complex geopolitical maneuvering. The situation in Gaza in particular sounds increasingly dire from the reports we're seeing.
It is. Devastatingly so. Reports from the Jerusalem Post, a prominent Israeli newspaper, indicate an Israeli missile strike in Gaza resulted in civilian casualties, including children collecting water at an aid site. The Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, attributed this strike to a malfunction or technical error, a detail also cited by the Washington Post.
Malfunction.
However, Al Jazeera, the Qatar-based news network, reported dozens killed in broader Israeli attacks on a water point and market in the same area. This discrepancy and the tragic loss of life have sparked widespread outrage and renewed calls for accountability regarding military operations in densely populated civilian areas.
And the tactics being used are raising serious ethical questions. Al Jazeera specifically reports that Israel is using commercial drones to bomb civilians in Gaza. That sounds incredibly problematic, blurring lines between military and civilian technology.
It certainly does, raising serious ethical and legal questions about the nature of modern warfare and the distinction between combatants and civilians. Furthermore, our sources note that an ex-prime minister, whose identity wasn't specified but referred to as an Israeli figure, has accused Israel of committing war crimes in the occupied West Bank. Al Jazeera drew a very strong parallel between these events and the broader historical failure of the international community's never again promise, connecting it from the Srebrenica massacre in Bosnia back in the 1990s to the ongoing crisis in Gaza.
Highlighting a perceived pattern of failure.
Exactly, highlighting a perceived global failure to protect civilian populations from mass atrocities. The human impact is profound and far-reaching, extending to deeply personal stories, like a 30-year-old mother in Belgium who fears for her children under Israel's bombs in Gaza, despite her asylum status.
Just heartbreaking.
It illustrates the far-reaching anxiety and trauma of the conflict for those with families still in the region.
And the very proposals aimed at providing humanitarian relief are themselves facing significant backlash. There's a report from the Japan Times about an Israeli plan to relocate Gazans into a closed zone in southern Gaza amid negotiations for a 60-day ceasefire with Hamas. Critics are going as far as to call these potential zones concentration camps.
The terminology here is highly charged and reflects the intense sensitivity and desperation of the situation. This proposal to establish a humanitarian city or closed zone in southern Gaza during a potential ceasefire has indeed sparked significant backlash. Critics, including prominent Israeli politicians like Yair Lapid and Ehud Olmert, as reported by Al Jazeera, are using the term concentration camps to describe it.
That's an incredibly loaded term.
It is, and this reaction highlights deep concerns about the potential conditions, the forced displacement of a population already under immense duress, and the risk of creating permanent, overcrowded holding areas. It raises questions about the long-term intent and the human dignity of such a solution, which many fear could become a de facto permanent detention for displaced Palestinians.
Moving to another flashpoint, there are disturbing reports of direct targeting of Iran's leadership, which, if confirmed, would represent a huge escalation and a significant shift in the shadow war in the region.
That's right, and it marks a dramatic turn. According to Iranian state-affiliated outlet Fars, cited by RT, a Russian state-controlled international news network, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian was reportedly injured during an Israeli airstrike on a secret underground bunker in western Tehran amid last month's war.
Injured?
Yes. The strike occurred on June 16th, targeting access points to the facility with 6 bombs, forcing Pezeshkian to escape through an emergency shaft where he sustained leg injuries. Al Jazeera highlighted that this incident resembled a Nasrallah-style assassination plot, referring to the September 2024 Beirut strike that killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah.
So, suggesting a pattern.
A perceived pattern, yes, of targeting high-level figures in proxy conflicts or direct confrontations.
And President Pezeshkian himself claimed to American journalist Tucker Carlson that Israel attempted to assassinate him, though Israeli officials haven't responded to that specific allegation. What has Israeli leadership said about their actions in Iran more broadly?
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has acknowledged ordering attacks to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, which is a long-standing policy objective for Israel. This move, according to our sources, is supported by the U.S., which also participated in strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities on June 22nd.
The U.S. participated?
Yes, according to these reports. Iran, for its part, has consistently denied pursuing nuclear weapons, stating its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, and labeled these strikes as unprovoked acts of aggression. The situation in the Middle East, therefore, continues to be a complex web of direct conflict, humanitarian crisis, and shadow wars, with regional and global powers constantly maneuvering, and the lines between conventional and unconventional warfare becoming increasingly blurred.
Okay, let's transition from global fault lines to global finances. And when we talk global economy these days, it seems former President Donald Trump is still making waves, particularly with what many are calling his tariff sledgehammer.
Indeed. President Trump recently announced the imposition of 30% tariffs on the European Union and Mexico, set to come into effect on August 1st. This move is framed as part of his administration's broader efforts to address perceived trade imbalances and protect American industries and jobs, aiming to level the playing field, as he sees it, against what he views as unfair trade practices.
It's a return to that protectionist stance.
Very much so.
And the immediate market reaction was pretty swift, wasn't it? It seems investors globally are sensitive to these kinds of announcements.
Absolutely. U.S. stock futures dropped immediately following the announcement, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average futures falling over 250 points, according to CNBC. Reuters also reported that the Indian rupee was set to decline at open as Trump continues to generate these tariff headlines.
So ripples across the globe.
Definitely. It reflects the global interconnectedness of financial markets and the immediate ripple effects such large-scale trade policy changes can have on investor confidence and currency stability worldwide.
So what does this all mean for consumers like you and me, beyond the abstract market numbers? How will these tariffs impact our wallets and the goods we buy?
Well, these tariffs could lead directly to increased prices for consumers and a potential reduced international trade. The European Union's trade chief explicitly warned CNN that a 30% tariff on Europe would effectively knock out transatlantic trade.
Knock it out. Wow.
Yeah, underscoring the potential for significant disruptions to global supply chains, the availability of imported goods, and ultimately higher costs for a wide range of products, from cars to cheese. It's a potential direct hit on the cost of living and the flow of global commerce.
But there was a glimmer of hope amidst that initial market turmoil, right?
Yeah.
It seems some investors are betting on a more nuanced outcome.
Yes. Despite the immediate drops, CNBC reported that losses were muted as investors bet Trump's tariffs will be lowered, indicating a degree of optimism among investors about potential policy adjustments or negotiations that might soften the blow. This suggests the market views these initial announcements perhaps as aggressive opening bids in a negotiation, rather than final immutable decisions, anticipating that compromise might eventually lead to reduced tariff rates.
Right. Maybe some negotiation room there.
Perhaps. That seems to be the bet.
And it seems the ripple effects extend beyond just prices and trade. The United Nations has even weighed in on the impact these trade tensions could have on international labor standards. That's a connection many might not immediately make.
That's a crucial point and often overlooked. The United Nations warned that trade tensions between major economies are fueling uncertainty over tariffs, which poses a threat to adhering to international labor standards. Well, it suggests that the economic pressure created by tariffs and the potential for a global slowdown in trade could lead countries or companies to cut corners on worker rights, wages, or safety regulations in a bid to remain competitive or mitigate losses. This could undermine global efforts to maintain fair and equal working conditions, potentially impacting workers worldwide, especially in developing economies.
From trade wars to digital currency, Bitcoin had been making headlines with an unprecedented surge. It's reached a significant milestone, hasn't it? Breaking psychological barriers for investors.
It certainly has. Bitcoin has achieved a significant milestone by surpassing $120,000 for the first time in its history.
$120,000.
Yes, with CoinDesk, a leading crypto news and data provider, noting a current trading price around $122,700. This represents a year-to-date gain of nearly 30%, far outpacing traditional investments. What's fascinating here is that it points to a growing mainstream acceptance and institutional confidence in cryptocurrency as a legitimate asset class, moving beyond just the early adopters.
What's driving this unprecedented surge? Is it just hype, or are there fundamental shifts at play that make this different from previous rallies?
This surge is largely attributed to a combination of increased institutional investment and favorable policy changes in the United States.
Yeah.
This is where the crypto president narrative really comes into play. Former President Donald Trump has actively branded himself the crypto president and implemented several crypto-friendly policies, signaling a shift in the political landscape towards embracing, rather than restricting, digital assets.
Right.
A key part of this includes the appointment of Paul Atkins as the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, the primary U.S. federal agency responsible for regulating the securities industry.
And what exactly has Atkins SEC done that's been so influential for crypto, attracting all this institutional money?
Under Paul Atkins, the SEC has taken several landmark steps. Critically, it has approved the first Bitcoin exchange-traded funds, or ETFs.
The ETFs, yes, that was big news.
Huge. And it dropped multiple lawsuits against crypto firms that were previously seen as regulatory hurdles. These approvals have contributed to over $50 billion in ETF net inflows. ETFs make it significantly easier for traditional investors, think large institutions, pension funds, even individual investors with traditional brokerage accounts, to gain exposure to Bitcoin without directly owning or managing the cryptocurrency themselves.
Bridging the gap.
Exactly, bridging the gap between traditional finance and digital assets. Furthermore, Trump also signed an executive order to create a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve, with states like Arizona and New Hampshire passing similar state-level laws, further legitimizing Bitcoin as a strategic national asset and signaling long-term government interest.
And there's even an upcoming crypto week in the U.S. Congress. What's on the agenda there, and what's the underlying philosophy or tension policymakers are grappling with in regulating this new frontier?
The rally comes ahead of Crypto Week in the U.S. Congress, where lawmakers will debate several important bills. These include the Genius Act, which is focused on regulating stablecoins. Those are the digital currencies pegged to a stable asset like the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
There's also the Clarity Act, setting standards for digital asset use, aiming to provide clear legal frameworks. And perhaps most controversially, the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act.
Anti-CBDC.
Yeah, which aims to bar the Federal Reserve from issuing a retail central bank digital currency, or CBDC. The core tension here is fascinating. On one hand, bills like Genius and Clarity are about establishing a clear regulatory sandbox, signaling a move towards integrating crypto into traditional finance and hoping to foster innovation. But the anti-CBDC bill is a direct pushback against centralized digital control. It's driven by strong concerns over privacy, government surveillance, and the potential for federal overreach into personal financial lives.
So regulation versus privacy concerns.
Exactly. The insight here is that while crypto is gaining mainstream acceptance, there's a fundamental ideological battle brewing over who truly controls digital money, the decentralized market or the centralized state.
So it's not just Bitcoin benefiting. The broader crypto market seems to be feeling the momentum and renewed confidence.
That's right. The broader crypto market reflected Bitcoin's momentum, with Ether, the second largest cryptocurrency by market capitalization, reaching a 5-month high. The total market capitalization of all cryptocurrencies is nearing $3.78 trillion.
Wow.
This indicates a wider validation of the entire digital asset space, suggesting that investors are becoming more comfortable with the sector as a whole, not just Bitcoin specifically.
Now let's quickly scan some other key economic indicators and business trends. Starting with the Bank of England, what's their current outlook on interest rates, especially for our listeners in the UK?
But the Bank of England is prepared to make larger interest rate cuts if the job market shows signs of slowing down, according to its governor, Andrew Bailey. He stated to The Times, a British newspaper, that he really do believe the path is downward on interest rates,
Downward path.
signaling a potential loosening of monetary policy if economic conditions warrant it, particularly if unemployment rises or wage growth softens. This is a crucial indicator for businesses and consumers alike in the UK, as lower interest rates can stimulate borrowing and spending, but also risk fueling inflation if not managed carefully.
Speaking of Europe, there's a significant energy crunch happening, driven by multiple factors. What's causing this surge in demand and pressure on reserves?
A regional heat wave across Europe, combined with extreme heat in Asia, has led to a significant increased demand for air conditioning and natural gas, resulting in lower than usual gas storage levels in the European Union. Bloomberg reports EU gas storage sites are currently about 62% full, which is well below the typical 80% seen in early summer.
62%. Heading into summer, that sounds low.
It is low, signaling a precarious position as they head towards winter eventually. This heightened demand has driven fierce competition for global fuel shipments, pushing European natural gas futures to a 2-week high and forcing Europe to pay premium prices to secure supply. The EU continues its broader efforts to reduce dependency on Russian energy under the Repower EU roadmap, aiming to eliminate Russian oil and gas imports by 2027. However, this plan has met resistance from landlocked nations like Hungary and Slovakia, which rely heavily on Russian pipeline gas, and have even vetoed the EU's 18th sanctions package.
So internal EU friction on that.
Yes, highlighting the difficult balance between unified sanctions policy and individual national energy security.
And a potentially significant shift in ownership models for the UK Post Office. This sounds like an interesting take on corporate governance.
Yes, the UK government has announced the potential for the post office to be owned by its employees, or postmasters. They are actively exploring worker ownership models.
Owned by the workers.
Potentially. This would be a significant change in corporate governance, aiming to empower staff directly involved in the operations and potentially improve service by aligning the interests of employees with the success of the post office. It's part of a wider debate about different forms of enterprise and economic participation.
From the UK to Japan, corporate governance is seeing some shifts there too, with a rise in shareholder activism.
A record number of Japanese companies saw shareholder proposals pass at their annual general meetings this year. This indicates growing investor clout and activism, a trend we've seen globally in recent years, but it's particularly notable in Japan, where traditional corporate structures have often limited external shareholder influence. It suggests a move towards greater transparency and accountability from Japanese corporations to their investors.
And finally, a very interesting development in Ukraine involving some U.S. investors taking control of a critical grain terminal. This has significant implications for global food security.
This is a significant business story with profound geopolitical undertones. Two American investment funds, Argentum Creek Partners and Innovatus Capital Partners, have taken control of the Olympics grain terminal at Ukraine's port of Odessa.
Odessa, right on the Black Sea.
Exactly. This followed a legal victory over the terminal's previous owners, G&T Group. This terminal is a strategically significant asset in global grain exports, with an annual capacity of 5 million tons, making it a crucial node in the world's food supply chain. The U.S. funds had loaned $20 million to G&T, alleging fraud. The Ukrainian Supreme Court approved the transfer, and the new management plans to resume full operation before the upcoming harvest season.
Just in time for harvest?
Hopefully. This development comes amid Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea Grain Initiative back in 2023, which previously allowed safe passage for Ukrainian grain, making control over grain export infrastructure even more critical for Ukraine's economy and global food security.
Okay, this next one. Here's where it gets really interesting and a little mind-boggling for you, our listener. We're talking about human impact on Earth, not just on the climate or environment, but on the planet's actual rotation. A geological whoopsie is how Popular Mechanics, an American magazine focusing on science and technology, put it.
It's truly a startling and humbling discovery. A recent study from Harvard University has revealed that the extensive construction of dams around the world has had a significant unintended consequence: the shifting of the Earth's poles.
Shifting the poles. How much?
By approximately 3 feet. This isn't just a minor blip on the geophysical radar. It's a measurable alteration to our planet's fundamental balance caused by our own engineering feats.
3 feet. That's incredible to think about. How exactly does building dams, which hold back water, cause the Earth's poles to literally shift? It feels counterintuitive.
The research, which focused on dam building activities from 1835 to 2011, indicates that the sheer mass of water impounded by dams has redistributed weight across the planet's surface. Think of it like this. Imagine a figure skater spinning. If they extend their arms, their spin slows down and their balance shifts.
Okay, I get that.
Similarly, the movement and concentration of vast amounts of water locked up in reservoirs behind these massive structures has slightly impacted Earth's rotational balance. This causes a phenomenon known as true polar wander, where the planet literally adjusts its spin axis due to changes in mass distribution on its surface. It's a subtle but undeniable consequence of shifting millions of tons of water from one place to another.
And this has happened over time, correlating with specific periods of major construction, right? It wasn't a sudden single event.
Exactly. The study implicates 2 major periods of global dam construction. The first was in the early 20th century, with significant dam building activity in regions like North America and Eurasia. The second wave occurred towards the end of the 20th century up until 2011, with substantial dam building, particularly in rapidly developing countries like China and India.
Right, places with huge projects like the Three Gorges Dam.
Precisely. The cumulative effect of these colossal projects across continents is what scientists have now linked to this measurable shift in our planet's axis.
So what does this all mean for us? It really underscores the profound and often unforeseen extent of human impact, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We're not just changing climate or ecosystems, we're changing the very physics of the planet beneath our feet.
Precisely. This remarkable discovery underscores the profound and often unforeseen extent of human impact on the planet, not just in terms of environmental and ecological changes, but also regarding fundamental geophysical alterations. While dam building has been instrumental for irrigation, hydropower generation, and flood control, this unintended side effect raises important questions about other large-scale human activities like groundwater depletion or even large-scale mining, and their potential long-term implications on Earth systems.
Things we might not even be thinking about yet.
Exactly. It highlights that even seemingly beneficial engineering feats can have global-scale consequences we don't fully anticipate, forcing us to rethink our footprint on the planet in entirely new ways.
And speaking of human impact and changing planetary systems, wildfires and extreme weather phenomena continue to be a major concern worldwide, becoming a new normal in many places.
In the U.S., we've seen some truly devastating events recently.
Unfortunately, yes. A historic Grand Canyon Lodge and multiple other structures were destroyed by a wildfire.
Oh no, the lodge on the North Rim.
That's the one.
In Arizona. This tragic event led to the closure of the North Rim of the Grand Canyon National Park for the season, and efforts are still underway to assess the full extent of the damage to the historic site. In California, super scooper planes, which are specialized aircraft designed to fight fires by scooping vast amounts of water from lakes, are being utilized to combat the green fire raging in the Shasta Trinity National Forest near Lake Shasta. The impact extends beyond local areas, too. We're seeing Canadian wildfires smoke blanketing the U.S. Midwest, affecting air quality and visibility far from the blazes, illustrating the transboundary nature of these climate-driven events.
So it's not just North America. The UK's Met Office, their National Weather Service, has stated that extreme weather has become the new normal in the country. That's a pretty stark assessment, indicating a fundamental shift in climate patterns.
It is, and it signals a significant and concerning shift. The Met Office's statement highlights an increasing frequency and intensity of severe weather events across the United Kingdom, from intense heat waves to heavy rainfall and powerful storms. This emphasizes the urgent need for preparedness, infrastructure adaptation, and changes in public behavior to cope with changing climate patterns. They've recently seen an end to heat health alerts across England following the third heat wave of the year, with cooler weather finally returning.
Some relief there.
Some relief, yes. But this pattern of intense, prolonged heat followed by rapid shifts points to the growing instability and unpredictability of global weather systems.
And we're seeing global water challenges, with both too much and too little water in different places, sometimes even within the same region. It's a truly complex problem.
A perfect and alarming example of climate variability. On one hand, heavy rains in central Texas have led to a temporary halt in search efforts for missing persons. And CNN highlighted the poignant story of a 94-year-old grandmother who tragically lost her house in the Texas floods.
It's awful.
In Spain, specifically in Catalonia, dozens of patients were forced to evacuate a hospital, the Penedès Regional Hospital southwest of Barcelona, as heavy rain and flooding battered the country, turning streets across Catalonia into rivers. This showcases the immediate and devastating impact of sudden, intense rainfall.
But on the flip side, some areas are facing severe drought, highlighting the paradox of climate change's impact on water resources.
Precisely. Conversely, Thames Water, one of the UK's largest water and wastewater service providers, has imposed a hosepipe ban affecting 1.1 million people in London and the Thames Valley.
A hosepipe ban in London.
Yes. This ban, set to start in August, is due to a surge in water usage during the summer heatwave and is a direct measure to conserve water resources in the face of dwindling supply. It illustrates the global nature of these water challenges, impacting communities through both scarcity and excess, often linked to altered precipitation patterns.
And there's a tropical storm intensifying near Japan, a recurring threat for that part of the world.
Yes, Tropical Storm Nari is intensifying as it moves northward, currently located southeast of Tokyo in the Pacific, with landfall possible. This highlights the continued threat of severe weather events, including powerful storms, which seem to be becoming more frequent and intense in many regions due to rising ocean temperatures.
Finally, a fascinating initiative from India to conserve energy, focusing on everyday appliances. It's a small change, with potentially massive implications given India's population.
India is pushing for air conditioners to be manufactured with milder temperature settings in a bid to conserve energy and address the environmental impact of widespread AC use.
Milder settings, like setting a minimum temperature.
Essentially, yes. Encouraging default settings that are perhaps less intensely cold. This is a proactive and sensible step to manage energy demand in a rapidly developing country with a massive and growing population, and it directly contributes to global energy efficiency efforts and climate mitigation, encouraging behavioral change alongside technological shifts.
Let's pivot to domestic politics, specifically focusing on the United States. The Secret Service, responsible for protecting U.S. leaders, is under pretty intense scrutiny following the shooting incident involving former President Donald Trump.
Indeed. A U.S. Senate report found fault with the Secret Service for the shooting incident involving former President Donald Trump, labeling the service's actions as inexcusable. The report highlights critical lapses in security measures and states there were multiple requests to enhance Trump's security detail, which were denied prior to the attempted assassination on July 13, 2024, in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Denied requests.
According to the report, yes. This incident tragically resulted in one death, injury to Trump, and the shooter being killed by law enforcement. The report, released by Senator Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky, has intensified partisan accusations in the U.S. Republicans are blaming Democratic rhetoric for creating a hostile climate, while Democrats attribute increased tensions to Trump's own fiery language and the divisiveness he sometimes fosters.
So a tragic event quickly became a political football ball.
Very quickly, highlighting deep divisions in American society.
And on a very different note, but still with President Trump, he's said to be hosted by King Charles III at Windsor Castle. A state visit is always a significant diplomatic event.
Yes, President Trump is scheduled to be hosted by King Charles III at Windsor Castle in September for his second state visit. This visit underscores the continued importance of the U.S.-UK relationship on the global stage, regardless of who occupies the White House, reinforcing the long-standing special relationship between the two nations.
President Biden has also been in the news, specifically addressing concerns about the use of an autopin. That's a device that automatically signs documents for clemency decisions. This sparked questions about his direct involvement.
President Biden claimed in a phone interview that he personally made all clemency decisions, addressing concerns about the use of an autopin in recording these decisions. He emphasized his direct involvement despite the autopin's use, aiming to dispel any notions that the decisions were automated or delegated, particularly for something as constitutionally significant as presidential pardons or commutations.
Trying to make clear he was personally involved.
Yes, the controversy highlights public and media scrutiny around executive decision-making and transparency.
And the intensity of immigration enforcement in the United States seems to be ramping up, particularly concerning children. The numbers are quite stark.
This is a very concerning and deeply impactful trend. The United States issued deportation orders to more than 8,300 undocumented immigrant children aged 11 or younger in April, marking a record high.
8,000 children in 1 month.
Yes, aged 11 or younger. Since President Trump's return to office in January, over 53,000 minors have been ordered for removal, many of whom are elementary school-aged or younger. The report highlights the distressing fact that some of these children appear alone before immigration judges due to cuts in federal legal aid funding, which means they lack legal representation.
Alone in court.
Some are, yes. The removal rate for children under 4 has tragically risen to 78%. Yahoo also reported on the messy aftermath of an immigration sweep in Pacoima, California, where a 54-year-old woman experienced a minor heart attack after being temporarily detained.
Just shows the human cost.
It illustrates the direct human impact and emotional toll of these intensified policies on communities.
Moving to key political developments around the world, we heard about the passing of former Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari. What's his legacy like in Africa's most populous nation?
Former Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, who also served as an ex-military ruler, passed away at the age of 82 in London. His death marks the end of an era for Nigeria, a country with significant regional influence. His legacy, characterized by a fight against corruption and efforts towards economic development, is remembered fondly by many for his perceived integrity. However, it also faces strong criticism for human rights abuses during his 20-month military rule back in the 1980s, and his controversial response to the 2020 Entag-Ensars protests against police brutality, which involved violent crackdowns.
So a complex legacy.
Very much so. Public opinion in Nigeria remains divided over his legacy, reflecting the complexities and contradictions of his time in power.
And a very long-serving African leader, President Paul Biya of Cameroon, plans to seek another term. At 92 years old, that's certainly raising eyebrows about political succession and democratic norms.
Yes, Cameroon's President Paul Biya, at 92 years old, has announced his intention to seek an 8th term in office.
8th?
Yes, he has been in power since 1982, making him one of the world's longest-serving non-royal heads of state. This raises significant concerns about continuity versus change in the country's political landscape, especially given his advanced age and decades in power. Critics often point to issues of governance, human rights, and the stifling of political opposition that can arise from such prolonged tenures.
A surprising passport dispute has erupted in Latin America, involving Uruguay and Germany. This sounds like a very specific, almost bureaucratic, international kerfuffle.
This is indeed an unusual diplomatic spat with practical consequences for travelers. Germany has officially announced it will deny entry to Uruguayan citizens holding passports issued after April 23, 2025, due to specific alterations, namely the removal of the birthplace field.
Removing the birthplace field caused this.
Apparently so. France has also expressed reservations. Uruguayan President Yamandu Orsi signaled a willingness to modify the passport design if necessary, stating the changes adhere to International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO standards, where the birthplace field is optional.
So, a disagreement over international standards.
It seems so. It's a conflict over standardization and national sovereignty in travel documentation, with implications for international travel and the perceived security of passport information.
We've also seen reports that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, often referred to as a strongman who inspired Trump's playbook, is reportedly finding his power crumbling domestically. What does that signify about the broader trend of resistance against authoritarian leaders?
This suggests a fascinating and potentially significant shift in Central European politics. The BBC reports that Orban's authoritarian tactics, which include tightening control over media, judiciary, and civil society, while admired abroad by some on the populist right, are facing significant challenges domestically. This includes growing public discontent over economic issues, corruption allegations, and a perceived erosion of democratic freedoms.
So pushback from within Hungary.
It indicates a potential shift in the political tides within Hungary, suggesting a fatigue with such governance styles and perhaps a general reassertion of democratic principles, a pattern that could resonate beyond Hungary's borders.
What's the latest on India-China relations, especially regarding the Dalai Lama, who remains a central figure for Tibetan Buddhists?
China has highlighted the Dalai Lama succession issue as a thorn in its relations with India. Beijing views the Dalai Lama, who resides in India, as a separatist figure, and his succession is a highly sensitive topic for China, which wants to control the selection of the next Tibetan spiritual leader.
A very sensitive point.
Extremely. While India's External Affairs Minister, S. Jaishankar, visited Beijing to strengthen cooperation, India emphasized to China the importance of avoiding trade restrictions, to normalize ties, and address long-standing border tensions in the Himalayas, a frequent point of friction. The long-standing Kashmir conflict between India and Pakistan also remains a focal point of contention, adding another complex layer to regional relations involving these nuclear-armed neighbors.
A controversial BBC documentary about Gaza has also been in the news for accuracy issues, raising questions about journalistic integrity.
A review found that a BBC documentary about Gaza breached accuracy guidelines by failing to disclose that its narrator was the son of a Hamas official.
That's a major omission.
It is. This raises serious concerns about journalistic integrity, transparency, and impartiality, especially on such a sensitive and politically charged topic like the conflict in Gaza. It highlights the crucial battle for narrative and factual representation in conflict zones, where the source and framing of information can significantly impact public perception and understanding.
And Europe is apparently doing a tightrope walk amidst the escalating rivalry between the U.S. and China. How do they balance their interests without being pulled too far in one direction?
Yes, reports indicate Europe is facing a delicate balancing act amidst the escalating rivalry between the United States and China. This increasingly intense competition between the world's two largest economies forces European nations into careful diplomacy to safeguard their own economic and political interests while managing pressures and expectations from both global powers.
Caught in the middle.
Essentially,
Wow.
Europe relies on China for trade and investment, but also aligns with the U.S. on security and democratic values. It's a challenging position in an increasingly bipolar world where neutrality or even balanced engagement can be perceived as taking a side.
Now, a quick scan of some notable crime and social headlines, because these personal stories often reflect broader societal challenges. Let's start with a tragedy at a Kentucky church.
This was a horrific event where two women were tragically shot dead at a Kentucky church in Lexington after the suspect shot a state trooper. The suspect was then killed by law enforcement.
Another church shooting.
Sadly, yes. Multiple other injuries occurred in this incident. While details about the motive are still under investigation, this tragedy highlights the pervasive issue of gun violence in the United States and the urgent need for community safety discussions and robust mental health support systems.
And the devastating fire at an assisted living facility, which tragically claimed multiple lives.
A devastating fire at an assisted living facility in Massachusetts resulted in 9 fatalities and 30 injuries. This is a profound tragedy that raises serious questions about fire safety protocols, emergency response, and the adequacy of care for vulnerable elderly populations in such facilities.
Absolutely critical safety questions.
Underscoring the critical importance of ensuring the highest safety standards for those who depend on others for their well-being.
In Ireland, the excavation of a child mass grave has begun, shedding light on a very dark chapter in the country's history.
The excavation of a child mass grave at a church-run home in Ireland has commenced, associated with the Bon Secours order. It's believed to contain the remains of infants and children who died in the institution's care, particularly during periods of high child mortality and institutional neglect. This excavation is part of an ongoing national reckoning in Ireland with the legacy of church-run institutions and the historical mistreatment and neglect of children within these settings, bringing painful truths to light for victims and their families.
A well-known TV presenter, Greg Wallace of MasterChef fame, is facing some serious misconduct claims that are impacting his career.
A report on TV presenter Greg Wallace upholds 45 claims against him, including one of unwelcome physical contact. The BBC is now considering his return to MasterChef as untenable, given the severity and number of the claims.
45 claims.
Yes. Wallace has since issued a deeply sorry apology, but these allegations have significant professional repercussions for him and highlight the increasing scrutiny and accountability for public figures regarding workplace conduct.
And a disturbing human trafficking case involving a baby being smuggled into the UK.
A woman was convicted after smuggling a baby into the UK using a fake birth story she allegedly bought. She was found guilty of human trafficking, conspiracy to commit fraud, and illegal entry.
Just horrifying.
This deeply distressing case shines a light on the desperate and illegal methods used in human trafficking operations, underscoring the extreme vulnerability of victims, especially children, and the dark networks that exploit them.
Social media also throws up some unusual and disturbing stories, like someone faking their death on TikTok. It sounds like something out of a movie.
A TikTok user shared their distressing experience of someone faking their death on the platform, causing shock and emotional distress among friends and followers who believe the false claim. This bizarre incident highlights the dangers of misinformation and malicious deception online, the ease with which such hoaxes can spread, and the very real emotional impact they can have on individuals in an increasingly digital world where reality can be manipulated.
And finally, a sobering note about self-neglect, highlighting a hidden crisis.
Calls for change are emerging after 6 people die amid self-neglect. This tragic statistic highlights the urgent need to address complex issues such as severe mental health challenges, inadequate social support systems, and the importance of community interventions for vulnerable individuals who may be struggling in silence, unable to care for themselves.
A reminder of those falling through the cracks.
A somber reminder of the need for robust social safety nets.
Let's end our deep dive with some brief highlights from the world of sports and entertainment. Starting with Wimbledon, we saw a major rivalry play out in the men's final that tennis fans are incredibly excited about.
Indeed. Jannik Sinner defeated Carlos Alcaraz 4-6, 6-4, 6-4, 6-4 to win his first Wimbledon and 4th Grand Slam title.
Sinner takes Wimbledon.
Yes, sweet revenge for Sinner, coming just 5 weeks after a French Open final loss to Alcaraz, and he became Italy's first ever men's singles champion at Wimbledon. This budding rivalry is being hailed as a gift to our sport that takes tennis to next level, promising exciting future matches. Separately, Iga Swiatek also won Wimbledon and publicly responded to critics, telling the Polish media to leave me alone, highlighting the immense pressure athletes face.
And a quick check on the football or soccer scene with some impressive victories and some sharp criticism.
England's women's football team achieved an impressive 6-1 victory by thrashing Wales, securing their spot in the quarterfinals of the Women's Euro 2025 tournament against Sweden, showcasing the growing strength of women's football. In club football, Chelsea trounced PSG to lift FIFA Club World Cup after Cole Palmer scored a first-half brace. However, the FIFA Club World Cup's portrayal was criticized by Sergio Marchi, president of FIFPro, the players' global union, who called it nothing more than a fiction, even comparing FIFA head Gianni Infantino to the Roman Emperor Nero.
Wow, harsh words for FIFA.
Very harsh, highlighting ongoing tensions between players' rights and governing body ambitions.
Anything notable from the MLB draft for our baseball fans?
The Washington Nationals selected shortstop Eli Willits first overall in the 2025 Major League Baseball, or MLB, draft. This marks the beginning of a promising career for the young player.
And a growing concern about online abuse in sports, particularly highlighted at Wimbledon.
A significant increase in online abuse directed at Wimbledon players has been identified, with over 2,500 abusive messages reported. This raises serious concerns about players' mental health and the pervasive nature of online harassment in sports, prompting calls for platforms and organizations to do more to protect athletes from targeted abuse.
Beyond sports, France celebrated a significant national day.
France celebrated Bastille Day on July 14th with a grand Paris parade celebrations featuring military troops from around the world and symbolizing national pride and unity on their national holiday.
A remarkable story of human spirit, a German backpacker surviving against all odds in the Australian outback.
Carolina Wilga, a German backpacker, expressed being beyond grateful to survive after being found lost in the vast and harsh Australian outback for 12 days. A true testament to human resilience and survival instinct against formidable natural challenges.
And some quick updates on health and tech innovations.
The UN Forum is set to spotlight health, gender equality, oceans, in critical bid to meet development goals by 2030, highlighting global collaborative efforts towards sustainable development. Japan's Emperor Emeritus Akihito, at 91, was admitted to the hospital to begin new heart treatment. On a more general health note, the Washington Post recommended light physical activity to ease muscle pain and stiffness, a simple but effective tip for daily well-being. In tech, Jack Dorsey, the co-founder of Twitter, now X, launched a new app called Sunday that allows users to track their UV exposure and vitamin D intake.
Interesting health tech there.
Indicating a trend towards personalized health tech. And Discord's virtual reward system, Orbs, has officially launched out of beta, potentially enhancing user engagement and gamification on the popular communication platform.
Wow. What a journey through the headlines today, from the shifting sands of global politics and economic landscapes to, well, the very ground beneath our feet literally moving. This deep dive has truly given you a snapshot of a complex, interconnected, and utterly fascinating world. So when we pull all these threads together, what does this all mean for us?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what stands out most profoundly is the sheer interconnectedness of global events and the often unforeseen ripple effects of human actions. A political decision about tariffs can cascade into market jitters and even impact international labor standards. Human engineering projects, like building colossal dams, can quite literally alter the Earth's axis, reminding us of our profound and often unanticipated influence on the planet's fundamental systems.
That dam story is still mind-blowing.
It really is. And in an increasingly interconnected world where information travels at light speed, the battle for narrative and accuracy, as we saw with the Gaza documentary, becomes as crucial and contested as the events themselves. This raises an important question for all of us. In a world of such rapid change, deep complexities, and global consequences, how do we, as individuals and as a global community, foster greater accountability, anticipate unintended consequences more effectively, and ultimately ensure that human well-being and planetary health are genuinely prioritized above all else?
That's a powerful thought to leave you with, a challenge for us all to consider as we navigate this ever-evolving world. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel a little more informed, a lot more curious, and perhaps a bit more ready to tackle the complexities and wonders of our world. Join us next time for another deep dive.